Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer here with Mike Gallagher. We have a 9-game slate on tap today. Actually, a relatively quiet injury report, all things considered. There are a few teams that we're still waiting to have filed. The Lakers, I guess, are the main one, with the second night of back-to-back in Oklahoma City, possible rest situation there. So beyond just commenting that, like, we just don't know what the Lakers are going to do, I don't know that there's much more to add there. But
there's one more thing to add. I'm doing good, man. Pumped for Friday here. One thing to add is AD hurt his thumb last night. So he's been listed on the injury report. You saw him kind of messing with it in the second half.
Yeah.
So that adds a little more likelihood that probable tag A turns into a question mark, and questionable, I should say. And then B, maybe he sits.
Yeah, I think the most likely scenario with the Lakers stuff is we get an injury report later in the day. They have to file by 1 o'clock the local time that they're in. So that would be or 1:30 the local time that they're in. So that would be 3:30 Eastern. I imagine we'll get something filed that just has questionables. And I don't think it's going to give us much information, but we'll see. But that's obviously one that you need to pay attention to because, as we've said before, with the Lakers, whenever you have one of the big stars out, the other guys become much more playable at the price tags that they're at. All right, so let's focus on kind of the big things that we know. Don't worry about the things that we don't know just yet. The biggest question mark on the slate was one that is kind of one of these midday downgrades with DeAndre Ayton, who is now listed as questionable. It's a matchup against the Celtics tonight. They're at home. Questionable with an illness, right? It's another one of these
non-COVID
situations. Yeah. So who knows in terms of his availability tonight? But obviously, when Ayton has been unable to go, you've seen Frank Kaminsky and JaVale McGee pick it up big time in the past, and it's been fairly consistent in terms of how that's played out. So, if Ayton is unable to go tonight, how do you think things shake out for the matchup with the Celtics?
Yeah, you'd think it'd be a pretty good JaVale spot, right? With the verticality there from him. Also, Frank Kaminsky's also out with a knee injury, so I mean they're pretty freaking thin if he can't go. So I mean that brings up, like, I guess it would be Jalen Smith time finally. But yeah, McGee, we know he has asthma. His minutes could be capped, but yeah, I mean it's hard not to. He'd be really, really, really good chalk with they're going to get the most minutes they can out of him even with the asthma.
Yeah, and he's had a really big usage rate bump in the absence of Devin Booker. He's actually been one of the Suns players that has benefited most. And I think it's because the Suns would often kind of stagger Chris Paul and Devin Booker a little bit, and Booker would stick with that second unit. And since he's not sticking with that second unit now, and it's keeping in kind of a lower usage substitute in there, I think now you're seeing more of JaVale pick and rolls and JaVale putbacks on offensive rebounds and different things, and him soak up more of the usage. Both him and Cam Payne are the two guys that have seen the biggest increases in usage without Devin Booker on the floor so far this season.
Yeah, and we've got a 133-minute sample of Chris Paul without both Ayton and Booker, and numbers aren't great. Look at JaVale, though. 25, 13, and 2 blocks.
Yeah.
That's per 36, which he's not going to play. But, yeah, as much as Time Lord is good, the Celtics' interior defense has been pretty good. It's also been steadily improving. But, I mean, it's just total potential smash.
Yeah, so there's a big opportunity there. That is a later game as well. So, that's the 10 p.m. game, and there's nothing else around it. And now we just, as we're talking, we got note that Dennis Schroder is a game-time decision, which...
I assume it was the ankle. Yep. So he tweaked his ankle.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to add some color to that. So he tweaked his ankle inside. Like you saw the LeBron injury last year. That's usually worse. And also, Ami Udoka said that he sprained his ankle multiple times this season, has played through it. He did play through it without really any issue after he was hobbling for the first minute or two. So I think he's okay. But as I said, those inside ankle turns are a little troubling. But, I mean, yeah, we could talk about how that would affect the rotation. Would obviously be a huge turn of events if he can't make it.
Yeah, and we had a Boston under queued up that we were ready to fire on props that I'm like so thankful we did not fire yet. One of the challenges of props and unders right now is like this Schroder thing. It wasn't listed on the injury report. Now it is. I'm glad.
I was surprised it wasn't. Honestly,
I'm glad it is now, but them not filing it before is annoying. And one of these things that's a good reminder that if you're out there betting props like on unders, even an injury report being filed does not necessarily save you from someone else potentially being ruled out and kind of ruining it.
They got Clippers-itis. That they saw the Clippers and like, okay, we gotta be late on injury report stuff.
Yeah, apparently. The other big questionable out there is D'Angelo Russell, who the Wolves beats thanks to Chris Finch, who's been really forthright in talking about D'Lo's potential returns and whatnot. Have suggested that it's trending towards more unlikely than likely that he's going to return tonight. We have seen Minnesota play for a few games now without D'Angelo Russell. It hasn't been particularly pretty. They got blown out by Utah. They were on the verge of getting blown out by the Hawks. They kind of made a bunch of threes late to kind of keep it relatively close. But with Pat Bev back, we've seen Bev slide into that starting spot. They're struggling to create offense. Ant and Cat have not taken on as much of the usage as you would think they should in those games. So far, it's been, you see like Naz Reid, Malik Beasley. It's been these secondary pieces, and that's part of the reason that they're struggling offensively. The matchup tonight is tough, Cleveland's defense. So going up against Cleveland's defense that's been so good without another one of their scorers potentially, do you think we'll eventually see Cat and Ant actually take on the big jump in usage that we would expect them to without D'Angelo Russell?
Yeah, and shout out to me, Anthony Davis, questionable, just came in. But I think it's a pretty good spot, especially given the matchup with Cat. He's going to see a lot of Evan Mobley, kind of a tough spot. So it certainly to me feels like a whole go Ant. Ant has gone off against good defenses. He's going to be ultra aggressive. He usually has mid 20s drives against good defenses, which what you want. So if he has anything going on his jump shot, and given the way I think Cat will be taken away a little bit, and Cat's a little hobbled too, has that tailbone thing he's playing through. I think Ant's upside is crazy high. I should add that Beverly, we're capping him a little bit on his minutes. He got 23. I think it was 13 first half minutes before it got to garbage time.
Yep.
So I think 26 is pretty fair with him, given that he's 33. He's had a lot of injuries, and there's been a lot of talk about just keeping him in check minutes wise. So
I think the other thing, even though the game isn't a wide projected spread, I think the other thing you just got to understand with some of these teams is when they're missing one of their key guys, there's just a little bit more volatility associated in things. And so I always like just being generally a little bit conservative in those situations, because you're going to get aggressive rate jumps anyway. You're going to get scaling up on the usage and the assist and all these things. And it doesn't always scale in a way that's super efficient for guys. So I always like being a little bit more conservative on the minutes end. We've done that with Charlotte and a couple of spots where guys have thinned out. We've missed on the minutes, but the projections from a fantasy point perspective haven't been too far off. And so I think, you lose a little bit of efficiency with these top guys too. I would play Ant before Cat tonight, but I think it's not the greatest spot against Cleveland just generally. I think Cleveland's defense is really, really good at protecting the rim, and so you're really jump shot dependent in those spots. Okay, some smaller question marks on the slate. Toronto, this one is interesting because Precious Achiuwa, he missed last game. Nick Nurse did start Chris Boucher. We talked about on the show last time that the tide had been turning a little bit for Chris Boucher in his favor. And then, Boucher did not play well. They lose to the Thunder. They get Justin Champagnie in there late, trying to basically close the game in really small lineups because Nurse is frustrated with Boucher. So where are we at on, do you think Achiuwa plays tonight? And do you think Boucher would draw the start if he did? Or if he did not start?
Yeah. I don't know if he would. I don't know about Precious. He's had his injury before, which makes you think it's more likely he misses. I think we're projecting him in, right? I feel like we kind of have to.
I believe so.
Yeah, so I think he's got a decent. I think he's kind of coin flippy, but man, Nurse had some quotes. He said they were soft at the rim, and he said he went to Champagne over the guys like Boucher, Spieg, Banton, et cetera, because he quote thought the other guys were playing soft and unenergetic and not playing their role, and they're not getting any stops against the freaking Thunder. So against the Knicks team that's going to want to bang, and they're going to want to, they're going to want to bang. I'm just going to end it with that. But against you don't want soft, unenergetic guys who can't get stops against the way the Knicks are going to attack them. So I mean, they put Svi on him previously, so I wouldn't be surprised if they just do that. I thought Svi was kind of okay in that instance.
The thing about the Knicks though is that, much like OKC, they don't have kind of a traditional like back to your basket low post threat, and so Boucher kind of matches up okay with Mitch and Noel from a verticality standpoint. But Toronto might also just feel like, hey, like we can put Scotty Barnes on Randall, have Pascal play center, and be totally fine in those spots too. So I could see this going in either direction with that. And as we've alluded to with Toronto, like the main guys, Siakam, Barnes, Van Vliet, Trent, they're going to play forever. The other guys, it's going to be hot hand. It's always going to be this. And so there will be moments we've seen like Svi get up to 36 in a game, right? Like there will be moments that these secondary guys pop, but it'll be very hard to figure out when that's going to happen because it's going to be completely dependent on who is playing well at the time. And if you play well, you will get more time. And is different than stat sheet stuffing for Nick Nurse. It's a lot of the little things that he cares about because the stat sheet stuff, he expects all the big guys to fill it out.
Yeah, and should add to the Knicks transition defense has fallen off and the Raptors are first in transition frequency. So Raptors are in a pretty good spot to score some points today.
There you go. Other small questionable, George Hill is questionable on the slate. Giannis is probable on that injury report. I feel okay whenever we see Giannis probable tags. I guess I should feel more concerned when we just don't see Giannis listed at all, given what they've done in the past. But not a back-to-back here for Milwaukee. So I think all the Milwaukee guys should be good to go. George Hill, whether he plays or not, I don't think it has a huge impact on the slate. We've talked about this before, but Connaughton and Grayson Allen and Rodney Hood get a little bit of a boost. But it doesn't really move things very much.
Only thing to add on Giannis, I was just going to add, it's a new tag. He had that calf soreness thing, so they're listening with a quad contusion. So, like you said, I think that it doesn't really move the needle, but just a working note.
Let's focus our attention to new outs and doubtfuls, and let's focus our attention to the Charlotte-Sacramento game, one of the first games to tip off tonight. Rashawn Holmes is out. He had a bloodied face last game and did not return and will miss this game as well. The Kings have plenty of center depth and options. I mean, they've played without Rashawn a little bit this year, but even in games with Rashawn, they've played three centers at times. They've played Alex Len, they've played Tristan Thompson. They're playing Marvin Bagley more of late. They've even played Damian Jones at times this year. So while it's a good spot to fill production against a Charlotte team that is pretty thin in the front court, it's hard to figure out who would get that, opportunity and how much leeway they would get. I think, both Tristan and Len have upside that's worthy of cheap tags, but I just would caution being, overly invested in this situation because they could easily play 3 or 4 different guys at the center spot tonight.
Yeah, and I forgot to note that Justin Champagne has a knee injury, didn't play in G League last night. He's questionable too, so it kind of throws into this whole wrench in this thing. But they started Tristan Thompson in the second half. I thought he played pretty well overall. He saw him put up 14 and 10. I think they were going to Len before. I think they would go back to that. And then Gentry really talked about, he said it was like the worst defense he's ever seen against this Magic team. And then you've got the Terrence Davis factor. There's a chance that Mo Harkless can get back in there.
Do you think for sure that they'd start Len or Thompson? Do you think there's any chance they start Bagley?
They seem to like him with the bench.
Okay.
I'd be really surprised if they started Bagley.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only reason I bring it up is just the matchup is not you don't need size really. Like you kind of need, not that Bagley can switch out to the perimeter or anything, but Charlotte's going to put a lot of action towards the perimeter, so you don't need that size necessarily.
Yeah. I don't think they've run Bagley more than like a handful of center minutes. I mean, maybe any.
They haven't had to. They haven't had to, so that it's not a need. But when you're talking about like if they get Harkless back into this rotation and they're needing to find ways to like get all the guys on the floor that they want to play on the floor, one of the ways to potentially do that is play Marvin Moore at center. Yeah. And so it's just something to think about out there tonight. I think Thompson and Len, whoever starts, will get some attention in DFS because it's going to be the first game of the night. We'll know who the starter is. They'll be cheap. And people will be interested. And I will just say, like, my interest would heavily depend on what ownership looks like it's going to be projected for, because I think those guys are really, really volatile, even if they're cheap. And, cheap centers usually are really easy to hit value because they get free rebounds. On the Charlotte side, PJ Washington was a surprise doubtful today. And the timing of this one was pretty good for us while sourcing props as well. I was noticing we were having so many unders on all these Charlotte guys in different ways. And then the news hit and it was like, oh, maybe the books had a read on this before we were, informed of this situation with PJ Washington, but he's doubtful. Usually, doubtful is 75% not to play in these situations. We've seen them, they're playing 8 of late. And PJ is one of those guys. And so if you take PJ out, how do they finish? How do they get another 8th guy in? And I one of the beats suggested Kai Jones, right? Or was that a quote from the coach?
Well, that was his inclination. Him and Vernon Carey would be kind of Knicks guys out there. I think based on the preseason and early camp stuff, it was Carey who was ahead. But given the way that Brega really talked up playing JT Thor, actually, like I wouldn't be surprised if JT Thor gets some small ball center minutes there too. So
I think they will feel comfortable even if the Kings are running out Tristan and Alex and stuff like that. I think they will be comfortable playing their really small lineups and just bombing away threes. They kind of know that they're willing to give up the glass if they can trade 3 for 2. So the question is just ultimately do they only play 7? Do they do something insane? And I don't know. They've been playing so tight. The estimated date of return earlier on the main guys was the 13th, right? That was the original hope, was Monday, the 13th. Has there been any more clarity on that?
It should be the 13th, at least the 13th.
And they've done really well through this stretch, much like Memphis without Ja. These teams are hanging in, these young teams playing fast, shooting a bunch of threes, and it's working out for them. But man, this is a lot to ask of these main guys. So we're projecting Kai Jones to get into the rotation. We're projecting a chance that Scotty Lewis, a chance that Kuboka, these guys they could play. But I think the main guys, Hayward, Martin, Bridges, Oubre, you're probably getting close to 40 again. Tons and tons of minutes for these guys in a great matchup. It's got to be the highest total game on the slate. It's over 230,
and it's a pick'em. There's no spread. What a game environment. It's insane.
So people are going to be firing at this one heavily. This should be one of the highest targeted points on the slate. Which also I would just say, since it's the first game of the night, when ownership condenses early, any late swap situations that happen late, which look, we just heard Anthony Davis is questionable, right? So any late spot situations that happen, they're gonna be low owned, just because of how much ownership's kind of going into the spot tonight. I see on the new outs and doubtfuls list you have Kyra Lewis. Why are we talking about Kyra Lewis?
I'm sad. I want you to share my sadness.
Okay. R.I.P. Kyra. I'm sorry. Yep. We'll see you next year, hopefully. But from a rotation standpoint, I don't think it changes anything.
Yeah. What a downgrade going from Kyra Lewis to Thomas Sederansky. But
some would say. From an entertainment perspective, I'd agree. From a impact winning basketball perspective, I'm not so sure. But I don't think it changes much for New Orleans. A little bit higher ceiling for Devontae Graham out there, but not much. Returns, we've got Cam Reddish listed as probable. That's really nice. The Hawks have been playing super shorthanded on the wings. We've seen TLC and Gallinari have to play at load of minutes. They get Brooklyn tonight. The TLC revenge spot in action. I expect Reddish will come off the bench. Do you assume the same?
I agree. They really like TLC. The last 2 games they put Anthony Edwards here, and he held him down. And they held Gordon Hayward down 2 games ago. They really like TLC as their main wing defender.
I will say this. I was surprised that TLC did not catch on last year, even because in the bubble when Brooklyn was really shorthanded in the playoffs against Toronto and stuff, he played well. In playoff series as a wing, as a 3-and-D wing, I thought that guy should be in an NBA rotation. So I'm glad to see him getting a shot this year with Atlanta. I was surprised that it was another one of these, Atlanta makes so many stealth small pickups that I'm like, oh man, that was sharp. The DeLon Wright thing, the TLC thing, drafting Sharif Cooper, drafting Jalen Johnson. I just think they're a really good player analysis organization. And so TLC should be in the starter's role, but I think you'll see lighter minutes on TLC, lighter minutes on Gallo, possibly lighter minutes on DeLon Wright, Gorgie Dieng, all to accommodate Reddish, who should get into the 20s, I would guess. But there might be a cap just because Cam's had lots of injury issues in the past. From a DFS perspective, I don't think it moves the needle a ton. You're probably not playing a lot of Cam. You're probably not playing TLC, probably not playing Gallo. And I think all the main Hawks guys that have been benefiting from Bogdanovic and Reddish being out still get most of that benefit because they're really playing with a low usage fifth starter now with TLC. And so Trae Young's seen a big bump in his assist rate, his usage rate. He's been on fire of late. I would expect that to continue. Heavy ball handling responsibilities once again. So I don't think it changes too much for Atlanta. Maybe lightens the ceiling of some of these guys a little bit because Reddish can come in and steal usage. But what do you expect in terms of Reddish and any potential minutes tonight?
Yeah, just to add on Trae, I think he's top 3 in usage rate, potential assists, and touch time. The guy's role is just absurd right now. But so the other thing too that I wanted to add from what you were saying, which is all spot on, is I think Gorgie Jang goes away almost completely.
Yeah, especially this matchup.
Right, exactly. The matchup's a big factor, and they just need to fill minutes, and they don't need to anymore now that Reddish is back. And he has a wrist injury, so he was doing light shooting when he first got hurt, so that means he's still been moving around. Conditioning should still be okay. The only concern about the minutes would be some sort of aggravation, but I mean, given the way they held him out for about almost 2 weeks now from the injury, you think he could get up there. We have him at 24 minutes, and I feel like that's definitely on the safe side, which we want to be on the safe side. But I think TLC's minutes are pretty safe. I think he's just a tick under 30. We'll see how Herder's affected. I think Herder's minutes are definitely safer than TLC's, but you never know. If TLC's cooking, I think Herder could maybe get ticked down. Gallo's minutes should be pretty safe. I think he's going to run a lot of the second unit with John Collins in the front court, especially against that second unit of the Nets. But and we'll see.
I think Gallo's had the opportunity to get up to 28, 29 in some games lately. I don't think he has that with Reddish back. I think it's more the higher end is 27. So I think he loses a little bit, but not dramatically so. Is kind of the way that I feel about Gallo tonight. On the other side of that,
just one thing on Gallo too, his usage to be affected too, because if he's out there with a Chuck and Reddish, they really ran a lot of post ups with him in the last week and a half or so.
On the other side of that game, we'll have Kevin Durant back tonight, as well as LaMarcus Aldridge. They both missed the last game. I did want to get your opinion on if there's do you think there's a possibility that because of the matchup with Clint Capella and the need for verticality, do you think there's a possibility they could start Claxton over LMA, or do you think they would just have KD on Capella here? What do they do? Because LMA cannot contend with Capella's verticality on the defensive side.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think they're going to start LMA. They seem really comfortable with that lineup. So, I mean, I mentioned in matchups, it's potentially a huge spot for him to kind of go ham, especially since he's kind of rested here. So,
for Capella or for LMA?
Capella.
Yeah.
They haven't played in a couple of days, so not back to back. So definitely.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll put KD on Capella.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
but then I mean, John Collins and Capella are somewhat similar verticality wise, right? To a degree.
I think and if they do that, I think Atlanta just flips the pick and roll coverage.
Yeah.
So, but I think there's going to be some good lob potential for Trae tonight for sure.
Yep.
Okay, Nerlens Noel returning for the Knicks. He was kind of like a surprise late scratch last game. Taj Gibson ended up starting in his place. Mitch was terrible, so the Mitch roller coaster continues. Was great the first game you moved to the bench, was atrocious the next game you moved to the bench. I assume Nerlens starts tonight when he's back, but I also do think this is a matchup where they can afford to go smaller and play, Obi Toppin center minutes if they wanted to, / Julius Randle, depending on who you view as the center in those spots. This is a matchup where I think they could, against Toronto, you could see the combined center minutes from Mitch and Noel tick down quite a bit.
Yeah. I think one thing to think about is the Raptors are excellent at getting back on defense. So by far allow the fewest transition possessions, 12%, which is insanely low. So that takes a little bit of shine off of Obi Toppin because that's really the best part of his game. So I think I'm with you for sure, especially if they're trailing. I think they would lead into it. But and then I should add too that a Nerlens Noel probable tag is a questionable tag for most people. So definitely do not automatically see me in.
True. All right, we talked about the Lakers having not filed. They did file now, so we have Anthony Davis questionable. We have LeBron probable. Expected both of those names to be on the injury report. This is basically what we expected. Don't think we'll get any clarity on that before lock time. It's an 8:00 Eastern game, I believe, in Oklahoma City tonight. where they try to get their revenge for the Darius Baisley dunk earlier in the season. We have seen them play Oklahoma City a few times. It has not gone particularly great for the Lakers.
Lost.
What do you think tonight? Do you think we see AD play tonight?
Also worth noting, he's listed with a knee. So I was shout out to myself. It gets taken away.
That's what he's been listed with of late?
No, he's been listed with the thumb.
He has been repeatedly with the thumb. I know that the thumb he banged up last night.
Yeah, he was listed as probable for the thumb yesterday. Okay. It's the third different time he's been listed with the thumb. Okay. He's been listed with a knee before as well. I don't know which knee it is. I assume it's the same one. But I mean, that certainly raises the probability of him possibly sitting here too. So
yeah,
I mean that changes things. They would probably go back to going big with the double centers. Obviously, Westbrook and LeBron would Westbrook narrative boy in OKC would be fun.
I mean, I honestly think the matchup against Oklahoma City would still allow them, if they wanted to play just one of Dwight or DeAndre, to do it. They could still play LeBron at center. They could play Carmelo at center. Like, they could get away with, like, nobody on OKC is going to hurt you.
Yep.
Like those OKC second unit lineups with Mike Muscala, Carmelo can guard Mike Muscala. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I still think you could get those. And they've been trying to figure out ways to get more THT, more Avery Bradley, because those guys have been they've been trying to figure it out, and they just haven't really figured it out. And so what they've been doing is they've been playing Dwight less. But certainly it, could be a route tonight is all I'm saying. Like, they have enough bodies now where they can do messy things. And without AD, you'd have confidence in LeBron and you'd have confidence in Russ from a projection standpoint. Everybody else, I'd be a little bit hesitant on understanding what the minutes look like, because I think there's a lot of different ways they could play.
Yeah, this is the lone AD list game that they got there, and they closed with LeBron at center in the overtime game too. So that's a good point.
And that was before they had made the decision on playing just one of the two with DeAndre and Dwight. So I don't know that, they played 35 minutes combined that game. You could get away with cutting that to 26 and having it all be Dwight. You know what I mean? So I think it's one of these situations where if AD was out, and let's say Carmelo was starting, I would say, or THT. I guess THT would probably start in that instance. They'd probably go LeBron, Howard, THT, Bradley, Russ is what they'd probably do, and have Melo still off the bench. I don't think that starting lineup gives me any indication on how they're really going to handle the reserves from a minutes perspective. And so from a projection standpoint, I would give DeAndre Jordan minutes in this scenario, but I'm not certain he gets them. And they could go to any of these guys, Monk, Ellington. There's just lots of different ways that this could go. So
I was going to add real quickly. I mean, they use that LeBron center lineup against the Pacers, Domantas Sabonis and Miles. So against JRE and Baisley, definitely more likely.
Yeah. So, all right, that'll do it for the last edition of the Established Run NBA Injury Report Analysis Show for this week. We will be back next week, 2:00 Eastern Time on Monday. If you are enjoying the content that we're providing here, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube page. Make sure you get all the notifications for whenever we post content and whenever we go live. Also, if you can like the video, that really helps us in terms of generating new eyeballs on this content, which we're trying to grow this YouTube channel and trying to continue to support this free content that we're giving out. If you are behind the paywall with us at Established Run's NBA DFS product, we will be streaming live today, myself and Mike Gallagher at 5:00 Eastern, going over the slate, breaking down everything from a DFS perspective and getting you ready to set your lineups. For us, for Mike, myself, I want to wish you guys best of luck in your games tonight. Enjoy a good night of NBA on Friday, and we'll catch you again. Have a great weekend. See you on Monday.